Welcome back to another episode by Unbelievable Education. Today we will be discussing an interesting phenomenon called the domino effect. But first, let's start with some background info. Pollinators are an important part of ecosystems as they help support plants, which in turn increases biodiversity. With climate change on the rise, many plants that rely on pollinators are facing reproductive challenges and even extinction. For example, alpine plants are located at higher altitudes, which are at an increased risk of habitat loss in comparison to low-altitude areas. This is largely due to mountain range areas being more susceptible to greater changes in precipitation and temperature patterns. Since plants are immobile, these changes can impact plants that require pollinator visits for fertilization. However, not all plants rely on pollinators as other forms of pollination and fertilization exist. Take a minute by pausing this video to brainstorm other methods of pollination without needing a pollinator. Other methods include wind pollination that transfers pollen between different plants and self-fertilization which transfers pollen from the anthers to the stigma of the same plant. But what would happen if the number of pollinators decreases drastically one day? Although there are many other methods of pollination, but it would take plants many generations to evolve such mechanisms. But what would happen in the meantime? Studies have shown that when pollinator visitation rates are low, flowers are generally long-lived. If flowers are long-lived, then plants are allocating more energy towards keeping their flowers open in the hopes of attracting a pollinator. However, what are the costs of having long-lived flowers? When resources are allocated for producing long-lived flowers, that means resources are being taken away from other important plant processes. Can you think of the processes that are affected by this energy allocation? Some processes include photosynthesis, growth, reproduction, defense, response to stresses, and root development. Having longer-lived flowers requires more nutrients and water, which are taken away from processes like photosynthesis. Decreased photosynthetic activity means less glucose production. Without glucose as an energy source, plants will experience stunted growth and fewer seeds or fruit production. There will be less resources for plants to defend themselves against diseases and stress. For example, fewer resources to fight a stress such as a drought, which is a prolonged period of time with low precipitation, may cause leaf abscission, stomatal closure, stunted growth, and reduced photosynthesis. Now let's view the impacts of pollinator decline on an ecosystem as a whole. For example, consider a berry crop that requires pollinators to visit them frequently. Suddenly, these pollinators disappear, and now their pollen cannot be transferred to other plants. Now think about who will be impacted when crops such as berry plants cannot produce fruits without pollinators. If you thought about us humans, animals, farmers, and businesses such as grocery stores, then you are correct. Studies reveal that insect pollination is important for 75% of all crops used for human food around the world. If pollinator-reliant crops decline, then the availability of essential nutrients that humans and animals normally acquire from food products will also decrease. In summary, this pollinator decline changes plant physiology, which then affects the ecosystem as a whole. This is called the domino effect. And now that you have made it to the end of this episode, it is time to test your knowledge with the worksheets. See you next time at Unbelievable Education.